Hello and welcome as we continue in our series of Introduction to Software Engineering. So today we are going to be looking at how do websites actually work, what happens behind the scene when you visit a website or when you type in a web address, website URL address and press enter, what happens behind the scene. So that's what we are going to be learning today. As usual, I'm going to be using a very simple analogy to explain most of this concept for you. So let's get started. Now, how the website work, right? I'm going to use a food delivery / food ordering analogy for you so that you can really understand the concept on how websites work behind the scene, right? When you try to visit a website, what happens behind the scene. Now, think of this. When you want to order food, right? You make a call to the restaurant and you place your order. Now, the restaurant takes your order and prepares your order, like cooks the food, like cook the food you want to make, like cook the food that you order. Then once the food is ready, the restaurant hand over the food to the dispatch rider. The dispatch rider takes your food and delivers it to your doorstep, your house. Now, once it gets to your house, you take the food, right? And unpack it and start enjoying it, to consume it. Now, the website works like that. So when you visit the website, right, something like this happens, something similar to this happens behind the scene, right? Something similar to this usually happens behind the scene. Now, the first thing is that your browser, which represents you from an analogy, your browser, whenever you type www.google.com, what happens is that your browser sends a request to a server. A server is just simply a powerful computer that stores all the files needed to display your website, needed to create your website, all the files that your website needs to work very fine, right? So the server is just a computer that stores all those files for you. So the browser makes a request to the server. The server then processes that request. Okay, you make a call, you drop your order. The server processes the request that you've made, which is kind of like the order. Now, once the request has been processed, that means the data is ready. So what happens is that the server hands over the data to the internet. The internet transfer that data to your device, transfer the files needed to display your website or the website you want to visit to your device. Then, when it gets to your device, your browser now takes those files and displays them on the browser, on your webpage. That's why you can see all those things you see. So this is what happens behind the scene when you visit a website. So let's go to the next thing. Let me just give you an example, right? A typical example so that I can really understand this concept. Let me give you a real world example. Like the one, let's say you want to log into your bank application, for example. You're logging into your bank application. So what happens is that the front end, we might have talked about front end, back end, and what database. The front end is where you see this form, where the form is displayed for you to enter your username and password. That's the front end, the user interface, what you see on your browser, right? Now, the API, which we refer to as the internet, sends those credentials, right, to the back end. So what happens is that when you type in your username and password, API is just like the waiter in a restaurant that takes your order and sends it to the kitchen. So the API is just the component that takes your request and takes it to the back end. Now, the back end is just the person, the chef that prepares your order, verifies your password, checks the account status. So when you enter your username and password, the back end checks the password and ensure that the password is correct, and also checks that you have an account with them, right? Checks if your email is available, verify that the password is correct, and once that is done, it now makes requests to the database. Now, for it to verify your password, right, it has to make requests to the database because the database is where most of your data is stored. So when you're creating an account, your data was stored in the database. So the backend makes a request to the database to fetch your data. And once it fetched your data using your email address, it now compares the password you presented when you're creating the account and the one you used when you want to log in, and compare the two. I did the same. If they're the same, that means this person is a legit user. Please allow him in. Not the same. Please, he's a fraud. Take him out. That kind of thing. So that's how it works. Now, once the backend gets that data, it makes that decision. Now, once the backend confirms that you are a legit user, your password is correct, it creates what we call a session for you. So a session, let's think of a session like a ticket, right? That allows you to access an application, right? Just think of it like for example, you want to travel, you have to buy a ticket, right? You cannot get on the bus without that ticket. So that ticket is what grants you access to that bus. That's the same way a session is just like a ticket that grants you access to the web application. So that's it. So the backend creates a secured session and prepares your data. Once it prepares your data, it now sends this to the front end, right? The front end is, remember, what you can see, right? Your browser, what you can see on your browser. So it sends this data to the front end of your browser. Then your browser now gets the info that, okay, this person user is a legit user. Let's log him in. Let's show him his account details, his balance, and the rest. And the browser now starts displaying all of your information. So this is kind of what really happens behind the scene. I'm going to show you a practical example later on. Now, let us talk about some of the tech terms, right? Let me explain some of these terms, right, that you might come across on a daily basis, or software engineer you need to know. The first term you need to know is what? HTTP/what? HTTP what? S. The full meaning of HTTP is just Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So that's the full meaning. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. What this is just simply the language that the browser speaks. This is just simply the language that the browser speaks. That's just as simple as that. So whenever the browser wants to communicate with the server wants to communicate with the browser, it needs to speak this language of Hypertext Transfer Protocol. If you use any other language, the browser will not be able to recognize it. Now, HTTPS is just the secured part of it. So think of it, instead of speaking your language, you now speak a dialect of your language. So for example, the HTTPS is more or less like, instead of you speaking a language that everybody knows, you are speaking a specific language that only the person you are talking to will really understand. So that's what that HTTPS means. S means secured. Means that only the browser and the server can understand the message that is being passed during the communication. Then the next thing is API. API is just simply the waiter that takes your request from the server, from the front end to the back end, from the back end to the front end, from the browser to the server, from the server to the browser. That's just what API does. So the full meaning is application programmable interface, right? Programming interface. So it's just a waiter that takes your request from one point to another. Then URL, which is known as Uniform Resource Locator, is just your web address, like for example your house address, right? So whenever you want to visit the website, you need to know the web address. Just like when someone wants to visit your house, you need to know your house address, that kind of thing. Now, the next thing we will have to look at is the IP address. Now, IP address is just like a phone number, right? Remember I talked about server. Server is just a computer that's a powerful computer that stores all your web files. Now, every computer has what we call an IP address. An IP address is just like a phone number, just like most human beings who have a phone have a phone number. If you want to contact me, you need to have my phone number. That's the same way every computer has a phone number or an IP address. If you want to communicate with that computer, you need to use that IP address. You need to communicate, make a call to that IP address. Now, that's what IP address simply is, just like phone number. So whenever you want to make a request, basically you're calling on that computer, you're communicating with on that computer. Then the next thing is hosting. What is hosting? Hosting simply means renting a space on the web, right? Renting a space. For example, now I build a website and I want everybody around the world to be able to access that website. I cannot leave that website on my system, because if it's still in my laptop, people in the world, it's only me that will be able to access it. People around the world cannot access that website. So for me to make it available for everyone around the world to access it, I need to rent a server space, right? I need to rent a server space. So hosting just simply you renting a server space where you store your files, your website that you have built. Then we have domain name. So think of domain name as the name you use to save a phone number. So think of this now. Every human being has a phone number, right? Now you cannot cram everybody's phone number, right? So we need a phone book, right? So a phone book helps us to save someone's phone number with a person's name. That's the same thing with domain name. Domain name, because IP address is a number, we cannot cram all the IP address. Like imagine you want to go to Google, you are thinking of the IP address, the numbers. It's very complex. So to make it easy, that's where they came up with domain name. So instead of you cramming numbers, you just have to cram the name of the company. For example, www.google.com, www.paystack.com. So that's what we refer to as domain name, and you have to get it. Then browser cache. This is just a memory in your browser that stores data so that your website can be fast. So instead of always getting the data from the browser can store some data instead of getting most of the data from the server can store some of the data inside the browser, which is the cache. So the browser has a memory which is called cache. The server can store some data inside that cache, so that it's not every time you need the data, you need to go to the server. You can just get it from a browser cache, and makes things load fast. That's why I see some websites are very fast. Then cookies. I remember most of you must have seen accept cookies. So cookie is just simply files that reminds the browser of who you are. So cookie is just files that reminds the browser of who you are, right? So it's just some of the files that tell the browser, okay, the last time this person logged in, this is who he or she is. An example is when you log into Facebook. So think of it this way. It's not when you log into Facebook now, right? It's not every time you have to keep on logging in when you want to visit Facebook. Once you have logged into Facebook once, you can just open the app and enter. You don't need to always log in. So the reason for that is that Facebook uses what we call cookie to save your session, like cookie, to remember who you are. So whenever you make a request to the Facebook server, it sends those cookies. So those cookies remind the Facebook server, okay, this is also personal, so no need to make it in, because is already authenticated, that kind of thing, right? So let's move on. Okay, so now I'm going to be doing a demo of how the website actually works. Like we're going to be seeing a demo how the browser communicates with the server and all those kind of things. So for us to see that communication, we are going to be using a browser. I'm going to be using Chrome. You can use any browser of your choice. I'm going to be using Chrome, and we are going to be navigating to the developer tools. Then from there we are going to see the network tab. Let me just get there. So now I'm on my browser. So for me to see how things work out, I just need to navigate. Now for me to see how my browser communicates with the server and everything, what I just need to do is open here for more information. I go to this where is it? Come in. I go to more tools. Yeah, more tools. Then I go to developer tools. That's for Chrome browser. So when I go to developer tool, I just come here to the network tab. I come to the network tab and see this. Now a shortcut for this is just to press F12. If I press F12 on my system, I can just come here and just navigate here. Now let us see what happened when we visit the website. What happened? So let me do www.google. Okay, see it here. .com. Press enter. Now, are you seeing what's happening here? Are you seeing? So this is just an example of what happens behind the scene. So when I press www.google.com, my browser made a request to the DNS server, which is the domain name server. As you can see up here, I'm sorry, let me come here. So you can see the request URL, which is www.google.com. The request method is get. The status is 200, which means, okay, this is the IP address. Are you seeing the IP address I'm talking about? This is the IP address and other things that are not necessary, so that I don't make this video too complex for you. So now that's just how you can see the connection, or how your browser makes requests to your server and vice versa. Okay, so that's come to